Or
Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. And as always, we are grateful to have new guests. And today I'm especially excited to welcome Marta. And I'm sorry to say that we do not have my co host here this week. She is unfortunately delayed in a client meeting. So we've missed her for 3 weeks in a row, and she
oh,
does bring a lot of value and insight. So we do hope to see her next time. So I am just going to say hello to those that are going to join us from Instagram and YouTube. Please do not hesitate to contribute to our conversation. This is a platform for all of us to share quite openly. And normally I do read the bio, Marta, but there's no reason why you can't. But before you do that, I'm just going to say welcome.
thank you
And
so.
we are looking forward to this conversation, which we've titled From Loss to Legacy and Rediscovering Purpose in Life's Later Chapters. And the question we asked is, what if it's not too late, but right on time? And we're going to be sharing Marta's inspiring journey of rediscovering purpose after loss and uncovering new dreams in her 80s. A powerful reminder that legacy is not just what we leave behind, but what we choose to live at any age. So I'm looking forward to this really heartfelt and uplifting conversation. And so I'm going to hand over the baton to you to share your bio and then kick us off immediately around what exactly inspires you to have this beautiful zest for life and see this as limitless possibilities, regardless of what age we start at.
Well, thank you so much for having me as your guest. I'm so honored to be here. I, if you would like to speak a moment about my life, my bio, I grew up in a military family, and so was living in many, many different places throughout my childhood and my teenage years. Um, After I married, I did live for a very long time in Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States, which is on the East Coast. My husband and I had two sons, and I uh, was very active in the Baltimore community. Um, and in raising my family and in writing. And you asked what made me have my zest for living now. I think that I've learned over the years through sorrows and joys and all the things that we all experience that I always think of Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. And I think that is the real secret. You must live in this moment as we are getting to know one another and enjoying one another. Um, you can't live in the past with regrets of the mistakes that we all make. You really can't live in the future because it never comes. Now is the only time that ever is. And so I think at 86, it is more important to me each day to live in the present moment.
I'm sure those that are listening in and are listening to you speak about this present moment, be here now. I know a lot of people won't know Ram Dass, but I think our audience and the typical audience that does listen in may be familiar. But for
Mhm.
those that aren't familiar, do go and explore Ram Dass's work. It is profound. It was ahead of its time, I think, if
Yes,
I can position it that way. It was
yes,
way ahead of its time. And only now people are truly learning to embrace the gift of the present moment.
yes, yes. I think he was prescient, truly, and a
Yeah.
great spiritual leader. He actually visited often in Taos during his life. and the town in which I live in New Mexico in the
Yeah.
United States. And so I admire him tremendously as a spiritual leader and as someone who lived his life to the fullest and very, very well.
So, Marta, I mean, you've had such a wonderful journey. I mean, if I look at your bio, you haven't given it much credit, so I'm going to do the honors of sharing it with our audience. Marta is a poet and author whose work spans poetry, ecological fables for young people, plays, essays, and critical reviews. She has written 4 award-winning collections of poems and has edited and contributed to literary journals and anthologies in the United States and abroad. Her work reflects a lifelong fascination with different countries, which is why she finds herself in the last 2 years where she is now, and she'll tell us more about that. That goes with different cultures, which began as a child growing up, as she said, in a military family assigned to numerous duty stations. She studied with Sister Mora. Now, I may say this correctly or incorrectly. Eichner
Yes,
is a German.
Laura Eichner. Eichner.
Eichner,
Hmm.
the acclaimed Catholic poet at the College of Notre Dame, now Notre Dame of Maryland University. With her husband, William, she raised 2 sons, Charles and Mark, in Baltimore, Maryland, as she has said, with her life, which was devoted to family, writing, and community involvement. Now, I want to come back to writing of poems. Where did you get that quest? Where did that start in your life?
I
That
have been
call to write and express yourself through your poetry.
I have been so fortunate, Anissa, because I knew from the time I could read and write that I wanted to write poetry. And I wrote my first poem at about 5 and a half. It was about butterflies being the flowers of the sky. And I've written ever since. I just always knew that poetry was my calling. And I was so fortunate in that.
I mean, I want to hear this poem or read this poem, Butterflies Being the Flowers of the Sky.
Right?
I
Well,
mean, I'm intrigued to know, as a 5-year-old, moving from base to base, I can call it, yet you could find awe and wonderment at that young age to articulate it.
well, I will repeat it to you if you would like. It's very short.
Good. I would.
Oh, the butterflies, oh, the butterflies are the lovely flowers of the skies, prettier than a rose could be, and they fly right through the air, you see, way up high, and they almost touch the sky.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Beautiful. I mean, butterflies is definitely one of my ultimate favorites and
I,
will always be because
yes,
they're just free and the colors
yes.
and there's so many different variations. I mean, in Cape Town, we have something called Butterfly World. And
Oh,
every time I go there, I'm in such awe because it gives us this feeling of diversity, yet such beauty,
mhm.
right?
Oh, yes. And I think the transitions they make in their existence are so interesting to me. And
Mm.
our lives can reflect that, I think. Coming from the cocoon of your childhood and your home and going out into the world free to fly and see all the beauty of it.
So talk to me about part of your journey where you were in this cocoon and how did you allow yourself to, whilst knowing at 5 you wanted to be a poet,
Yes.
how did you stay the course to pursue that journey? And who was on your side almost holding that sacred space alongside with you to encourage you to pursue it?
Well, my first very important teacher and person in my life was my grandfather. Um, During the Second World War, when I was very small, my father was in the Pacific at war, and my mother returned to her mother's home and father's home to stay there. I was very small. My grandfather had had to retire early because he had rheumatoid arthritis. And in those days, there was really no true cure for it. And so he was bedridden. And I spent a great deal of my time with him. He taught me to read. He taught me to look up words in his dictionary, which is sitting in my living room right now. I still have his huge old Webster's dictionary. And he had a large library. And once I could read, he allowed me to read anything in the library that I wanted. And of course, you read it at your own level. Gulliver's Travels was just a really exciting adventure story to me. I didn't understand the political implications at all. And Pilgrim's Progress, I didn't understand the spiritual implications of Pilgrim's Progress. It was just a wonderful story to me. But the older you become, the more you understand. And I think he was the first big influence in my life and was very enthusiastic about my little poems. And he died when I was about 6.5. And then I continued to write. I didn't write seriously throughout most of the years when my children were young. I was more involved in raising my family. But once my sons were away at school, I at the college level, I decided that I really could be serious again. I had published in a small way over the years and had never stopped writing. And so I loved the work of a poet named Sister Mora Eichner, of whom you spoke, and was fortunate enough to go and study with her at the College of Notre Dame in those days. And she was a tremendous influence in my life and in my poetry. And at that same time, I had the great good fortune of meeting Josephine Jacobson, who had been what was called, she was actually the poet laureate of the United States before I knew her. And she also was a great influence and so wonderful about introducing me into the people in the poetry community that she knew. And then these are all women except for my grandfather. My third great influence was Regina Soria, who was a professor emeritus at the College of Notre Dame and an art historian. And she became an adopted mother to me, a mother of the heart. And I grew to know her family well in Italy, who were all literary people. Her sister, Angela Bianchini, was a very well-known novelist, and she had written important biographies of Americans who had gone to Italy for their inspiration as artists. And so I fell in love with Italy, met many of the writing community there, and I found myself at one point in my life living off and on in Italy and working there with different editors. And so those were the tremendous influences, I think. And I got to add my husband as someone who was very supportive in my endeavors always.
I just love this. You've made me transport onto this journey with you from the start. And there was a movie I watched actually. Now, I cannot remember the name, but there's one famous place in Italy where all the writers gather, whether they are poets or they write different genres, they all gather in this particular place. Is this the same place that you potentially have been to or have been to?
Well, I lived in Rome in Monteparioli, which is just outside one of the old Roman gates. And I also lived with my adopted family, who were so gracious to me, in Cetona, which is at the top of Umbria, just below Tuscany. It's between Siena and Florence. And so, and I went to conferences and in many different cities. I wish I were aware of the particular city that you're speaking of. I probably have been there.
I'm sure. And it's off the top of my head. If I'm going to remember it, I will message you privately and and tell you which place it is. But it was a beautiful movie nonetheless. So coming back to your life in terms of, let's talk about the losses.
Yes.
Because Marta, we all go through loss, and there's so much grief that comes with that loss. And so it's very difficult to stay in this moment now, in the present moment, when we experience any type of loss.
Yes.
How did you overcome losing your husband along the way, and potentially like many other losses that you may not have written to us about? But what were your ways to overcome the grief and to stay present and to stay the course of your journey to do the wonderful work that you're doing today?
It was a terrible time in my life. I had met my husband when I was 18 years old. He had been the center of my life for 41 years. And when I was widowed at 61, I I could not even describe to you the depth of my sorrow, because he was a truly wonderful husband, a wonderful man, and a wonderful father. And I felt I had no idea how to go on. I just felt stunned for a while. And then I began to try to deal with the grief, because you must live in that moment to ever get past it. You can't just ignore it. But I did move from our home. We had retired to a home on a river on the eastern shore of Maryland. And I met my brother out west. My brother, who was very, very supportive as well, and his wife, suggested that I come out and have a visit with them. And so we traveled to a place called the Big Bend in far west Texas, which has a wonderful national park. It is a beautiful, beautiful place in the high desert, the Chihuahua Desert, with the Davis Mountains. And I was very, very struck by the desert. The desert spoke to me in a way that landscapes and ambience had not spoken to me before. And so I found myself over the next 10 years living in several of the small towns in that area. And I've also lived in the desert, the Sonora Desert in the south of Arizona. And then here again, this is a predominantly desert state. And so I think the desert, the solitude, the enormity of it, the gave me the silence and the space in which to come to terms with my grief and to truly live in the moment, because it is so wonderful that you have the opportunity to look at one cholla, which is a cactus, or one sagebrush, or watch one crow fly across the sky. It gives you time to understand that this moment is really all there is. And so somehow that helped me a great deal with my grief. And I returned to writing again. I did not write for several months during this period, but my writing changed because of it. And I became very, very fascinated with the form of writing haiku, which, as you know, is a Japanese form of verse that is 3 lines of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And it seemed to also express in poetry living in the present moment, because what you're attempting to do in haiku is your emotional experience at what you are seeing in nature in one moment. You're trying to express it and share it with others. And so that is a very long description of what happened to me.
No, I enjoyed listening to that part because I think for those that are listening in, I mean, the topic of today is really about talking about how do we go from loss to legacy. And what I like is that it isn't when you have left this earthly realm, it is how can you build and cultivate that legacy every single day. And
Yes,
yet, what I'm hearing you say, in your grief stricken moments, in the solace and the silence, you were able to reconnect with a way different version of yourself, almost a more expansive version, so that you could give that version back to the world and even enhancing the legacy that you're cultivating. So I think for those that are listening, many feel that being silent is the most scariest thing. I think most people don't like to be in silence for very long. I was fortunate to attend a 10-day silent Vipassana experience. And Marta, it was it was the most difficult at the start. But like you, I started to really truly connect and tap into me, the
yes,
sensations of my body. And then also when I was more tuned to myself and what was happening within me, it almost gave me a different vantage point and lens to view the world from.
yes,
So I totally relate to what you are saying, that your style of writing became different because
yes,
now you were different. You were the
yes,
same, but different in your perspective of the grief and of life itself.
yes. Yes, I think I was very fortunate, and I understand what you mean about silence. It's terrifying because think of our culture, it's just constant noise and constant busyness. Uh,
Yes.
I know people who go to sleep with a radio on or the television on because they literally cannot go to sleep in silence. And I think, unfortunately, we are asleep in a different way in all of this chaos and noise. And we don't really awaken until we lose our fear of the silence and allow it to become a sort of interior landscape from us. And that is what the exterior landscape of the desert did for me.
Now, Marta, we were talking before we started the segment today, we were talking about worldly stuff, loss is but one of them. And then we have all the systemic issues that we're dealing with. I was quite pleasantly surprised at your experience of the systemic issues and the disparities between the super rich and those that are, I like to call it, differently advantaged or less privileged than others that are living below the breadline. Now, when somebody is in survival, so here's where I'm heading in this direction. When people are in survival, it's very difficult for us to say, be in the present moment because their present moment is survival. So, how do we get people that are in the survival um, for the fittest, for lack of a better statement, find possibility in life, see the wonderment, see awe, and think about how am I going to cultivate a legacy in that context? What would be
Well,
your sage advice to people
I'm
like that?
not sure it's sage at all, but I feel very deeply about this. Of
Mhm.
course, it's very, very difficult to attempt to live in the present moment when you are hungry, when you have nowhere to live, when you are in a snowstorm or freezing to death on a sidewalk. Um, and I think it is imperative that our societies deal with this so these people can reach a place past survival and can hope again. I think it's almost impossible for them in their present conditions. And then we have the, as we discussed earlier, the awful problem of drug addiction on top of it, which is their survival, by the way. And that is the only way they survive these horrendous conditions in many cases.
So, how do we inspire hope?
Well, I think we inspire hope by caring about them and caring about them as a society and attempting to make their lives better, to give them shelter, to give them hope that their lives will get better. And I think training in some kind of way so that they can become members of society again, the society that has just dumped them.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean, it
they,
does break my heart. It really breaks my heart, as I was saying to you earlier on, as I
yeah,
drive and I look at the made up makeshift homes or shacks, and
yes,
I ask myself, you know, what is that person's reality? And do they have anybody supporting them to inspire that they need to never give up on a dream that they had? You and I are fortunate. I always intuitively knew I want to serve people. I want to hold sacred space for people. I want to unlock potential for others. And I've always known that. But for a person that does not get the opportunities or
yes.
does not have mentors or guides or wise sages, what do we need to do for them and how do we support them? What is
Well,
our responsibility, first and foremost,
it
to
is
change
every
that narrative?
it is everyone's responsibility. And there are, I'm happy to say, soup kitchens here in Taos, places where people can be fed. There are shelters that we can support monetarily and voluntarily. Um, they are inadequate. There are not enough of them.
Yeah,
But I think as a society, there are many, many people who, and many organizations, many of them religious and some of them secular, that are trying very hard to help these people. But I think it is imperative that we, as each person, offer our sympathy and empathy and concern, financial aid when we can. Um, and I try to do that. But I think so many people try to do that.
yeah. So coming back to your life and the idea of cultivating legacy on a daily basis, I mean, if you think about the younger version of yourself, because you're in your 80s, which you look amazing, by the way, for somebody
86.
who's in their 80s, and you have an energy about you that your life is just beginning. So I
Every,
love that about you.
every
So
moment.
if you had to speak to your younger version, what would you tell your younger version that you could have done differently?
I think I could have been. Oh, that's such a good question. Let me think a second. Um, I think that younger version of me never ever imagined that I would live to be as old as I am. I think that younger version of me was so busy in raising her children and supporting her husband and his work and doing the community work I could at that point, um, that I don't think, and writing when I could, I don't think that that younger person ever thought, wait, I'm going to stop and live in this moment. I think I somehow just lived through my days and then got up the next morning and lived through my days again with great joy. Please don't misunderstand. had a wonderful family and have wonderful sons, and they have wonderful
Yeah.
families now. And but I think that it's easier to suddenly to be able to live in the moment when there is less busyness in your life, when there is less responsibility in your life. And so I would tell that person to take a deep breath and try to live in the present moment. I don't know how successful she would be at it, but that's the advice that I would give her.
Okay, so I mean, you hit the nail on the head because in the in the information age we're living in, with social media currently that we're living in, it's a different world that we're living in. Even if I look at my kids that are 11, 15, and 18, the pace that they are at in the digital realm, it's
Astonishing.
so difficult to actually switch off.
Mhm.
And let's face it, us as adults are not leading by example because we
No,
also get sucked into the screen. And I
yes.
have my 11-year-old always saying something to me in this context. He says, "Mom, you keep showing me all these things about being too much on the screen, but where was this video made?" So he's cheeky.
Yes, and he's
He's
right.
quite cheeky.
And he's right too. Well, I
It's
think
true.
that I social media is something that I is a part of my life. It has to be a part of your life.
Mm,
But
mm,
I try very much to not make it an enormous part of my life. I am not a person who is constantly on my phone looking for messages or emails. I try to take part of my day to be sure that if there's something I need to know, I know it. But then I turn the phone off and I turn off the devices. I really think the answer is going back into nature again.
mm,
Nature is our great solace, and we are losing it. We are living a facsimile of it through artificial intelligence that's very daunting to me. And I don't think we have any idea where that is going ethically yet, as we often don't in our new scientific discoveries. We always are running after it, trying to deal with it morally and ethically. And I think that's true of what's happening in our world at the moment.
mm. Yeah, the reason why I asked the question about your younger self is because I was thinking about, you know, young kids that need to discover their purpose, or young adults, or mid, those that are in midlife, like myself. I'm version 4.7. I call it version 4.7 as the upgraded version of myself. In fact, I celebrated it last week, Friday, Marta.
Oh my,
So every
yeah.
single time I have a birthday, I ask myself the question, am I truly cultivating legacy daily? And even the way I serve my clients, I say to them, if you only had a short period on this earthly realm, how would you live it?
Mhm.
What would you do different? What would be priority for you versus the noise that we surrounded by?
There's
Because we
noise.
do get sucked up by the noise. So you mentioned nature, and
Yes.
I agree because nature has many lessons,
Yes.
and there's so much to take from it because we are one with nature. But how
We're,
do we educate those that are in a slumber? As you said earlier on, people
yeah.
are asleep in a different way. And
Yes.
regardless of the age, we have young people that's still asleep, and then we have people in their midlife that is still asleep that is
Yes.
still going forth with the noise.
Yes.
How do we educate or guide or support people to think differently?
I think maybe example is one. I think with my children, we always tried very often to do many things out in nature, and we took them on trips to beautiful places as well as historic places. Um, I think that they also enjoy nature very much. And I think because of the way that we lived, but I don't think, Anissa, in my younger years, we had as much noise or as much distraction as we do today. I'm more concerned. My sons are in their 60s, for goodness sake. I'm more concerned about my granddaughters,
Yes.
and they are in their 20s, and one of them actually did a double major when she went to college, and one of her majors was earth sciences. And so she's taking her master's degree at Penn State now in earth sciences, which is wonderful. And her other uh, degree was in this double major was in Spanish, and so I think that opened a world to her in a way that is so much more interesting than a world where you only speak one language. And so I think perhaps she, through her great enthusiasm for the natural world, is finding her way. And so I can only look on her as an example for me uh, to be more in nature, because after all, we are all we are nature. We are not separate from it. We are all one in this beautiful energy that fills us and surrounds us as well. And so I I just am so distressed that so many people are not aware of that because of the artificial world which we are building.
So, Marta, I'm going to stay on the question around legacy because at 86 years young, I'm going to call it,
You.
you know, um, how do one stay relevant at your senior years, at this wise sage years where, people respect you because of your age, but yet you want to remain relevant and still continue cultivating that legacy? What are some of the things that you do to stay relevant and contribute meaningfully to this legacy of yours?
Well, I hope there will be a legacy. Who knows? Who knows? But I I work. I think it's important to keep working, and so I write every day. I think it's very important to be involved in your community. And so I think it's important to have younger friends, which is very easy for me because I'm older than most everybody I know. So that isn't a problem. But I do have wonderful younger friends. And I think also it's very important to live a healthy life. I
Mhm.
I practiced yoga my whole life and still do. And I also attend a wonderful class with other people my age in an organization here in town called Age Up Well. And it is where we do a combination of yoga and weights and Pilates. And so I think it's very hard to live in the moment and be happy and excited about life if you are ill and if you are in a body that is in pain. And so I think it's important to keep that body as healthy as you possibly can keep it. And I think using your mind is very, very important. I think being aware of what is going on in this world and seeking ways in which you can make it better is tremendously important. And so I think those are the ways I try to be relevant. But I must say that my culture, I don't know about South Africa, my culture does not really honor age particularly. I think they look on age as a burden and they are very afraid of it. It's a youth culture.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Agreed. Because, and that's why I was asking this question, because I know there are many retirement homes in South Africa, and I ask myself, you know, I wonder what my kids would do. Would they place me in a retirement home because I'm seen as this burden getting older? Or what would it be? Because I know there was some study in the States, and I stand corrected, but there was an interview, don't know if it was with Oprah
Perhaps.
and somebody else,
Hmm.
and it was how children see the need to break away from their families for if they felt that it was going to add to their core wounds. And when I say core wounds, the mother wound, the father wound, if they wanted to break the generational curse, so to speak, they would cut family ties. And
Well,
for me, it's really sad because family ties is important to enhance that legacy. Family is necessary for that legacy.
absolutely. Well, yes, it is tragic when children feel that they must not have their parents in their lives. I'm awfully fortunate. I enjoy a very good relationship with my family and my sons. We live at a distance from one another, but with here is a modern thing that I love with Zoom. It's very easy to stay in contact and we visit. And I think that they would prefer that I live closer, and perhaps I will eventually if I'm here. But at the moment, uh, it's working very, very well with my family. But I know that children, particularly of this generation, feel the wounds so deeply that truly every parent inflicts inadvertently. Parents don't mean to wound their children. I think they just learn as they parent and make tremendous mistakes. Of course, I did, and my husband did too. I'm fortunate that my children have forgiven me those mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm coming back to Oprah and Maya Angelou, which I know
Oh,
you will know.
oh, indeed I do. Indeed I do.
And I
Amazing.
remember Oprah asking, or not asking, Oprah telling Maya Angelou, I know what my legacy is going to be. It's that school in South Africa. It's an
Yes.
all-girls
The
school, a
girls school.
leadership school.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Maya Angelou said in you know, her voice, you don't know what your legacy is going to be. How do you know? I
We don't.
don't now do it justice what she said exactly verbatim, but she was actually saying to Oprah that your legacy is who you connect with and who you touch, the
Yes.
person's lives that you touch every single day. And it
Exactly.
could be so varied from the person that you were kind to at the stop that is really struggling on that day, or a homeless person,
Yes.
or somebody that's in a store, maybe in the same line with you waiting to pay, but is sitting with so many different problems in their mind. And yeah, you come along and extend a kindness to them. It's those little random acts of kindness that all contributes to this greater legacy.
I
And
agree with
so, Marta, from your perspective, for those that think it's got to be this grandiose, big gestures, what are your advice to those that want to leave a legacy? What should they think about doing or showing up as in life?
I think it comes from love. We must love one another. I know that sounds like such a cliche. And when I say
Yeah.
one another, I mean everyone that you
Mm,
touch. And it's very hard to love people sometimes, as we know. But it's important at those times, I think, to think they must be so very unhappy to be behaving in the way that they are and to try very, very hard to feel a kind of empathy for them and not to respond in the way that they are acting at the time. And I think being open to the world and to the experience, being open to everyone you meet has a lesson to teach you.
mm.
And I'm sorry, my cat ran up her cat tree.
But
Back.
looking at the cat, I was like, how many cats does she have? Do you only have the one?
I have one. She is a black cat named Luna, and she is a rescue. I don't know if you know, but here in the States, black cats are the last cats to be rescued because there are all kinds of bad traditions about them.
Yes, the
So,
bad omens.
yes,
Yes.
well, she rescued me. She is a delightful part of my life.
Oh, Marta, in the Islamic faith, we have a very high regard for cats, and we believe somewhat that cats will help us on our journey if
I believe
we are kind. I see she's back again. Is it a she, Luna?
she, Luna, yes. Um,
And so Luna is. Did you mention it because give her the name because of the moon?
when I rescued her, her name was Midnight, and I could not think of a good little short nickname for her. But I thought a friend of mine here in town, Anne Lawrence, and I were talking about names, and Anne mentioned the name Luna, and I thought that's wonderful. I'll think of her as Midnight Moon. And so she is now Luna, and just a wonderful part of my life. She's made my home such fun. And
My friend that I'm visiting at the moment, where I'm doing my live, she has many cats. And
oh,
when we visited Turkey, oh my word, there were so many cats in Turkey. They were
yeah.
just like in awe of the cats, and every little cat they try to feed because they love cats.
Well, I'm fascinated about your story about your faith and cats within the sort of the wonderful myths about cats within
Yes.
your faith. Um, am I correct in believing that Muhammad had a cat? Is that correct?
Definitely, definitely, he's had a cat. He was a lover of animals and people, he treated everyone fairly. There was no judgment and there was no criticism of human beings and for animals. That's why we try to embody his character, because his character was all about, let's come back to it, love, right?
Exactly.
So in the embodiment of love. And I actually think that is such a pertinent point to bring back here, because if you lead your life with love, compassion, and kindness and empathy, that in and of itself is a monumental legacy that you leave behind just by showing up in that good character.
By being here now.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, Marta. So from your side, is there anything on, I mean, we've covered so many different topics here today, but I want to bring it back to your life, your story. What was some of the most difficult parts of your life outside of the loss of your husband? Because we have many of these heroes' journeys where we're into the abyss of the darkness and experiencing some form of loss, which is not always somebody passing away, but
No,
there's some loss or betrayal or grief. And it sounds like you've had a beautiful and still continue to have a beautiful, wholesome life. But
I
were there any other losses that you endured, and
yes,
how did you overcome it?
I, I think truly the first great loss was my grandfather because he was such a tremendous influence for good in my young life. And
Mm,
then my grandmother lived with us and traveled around the world with us. And she developed Parkinson's disease. And so, although she did not die for many years, she truly was gone as the wonderful grandmother that I knew. And I think the loss of our parents is always an enormous loss. Um, I think the loss of friends for me at the moment is it's very difficult to look through. For example, when I sent out my holiday cards this year, my Christmas cards, to look through my address book and to see with the names with deceased after them, deceased,
mm,
deceased, deceased. And these are friends, many of them who were lifelong friends. And that is very, very hard. And they're always with you in a different way. But it is a
Mm.
great loss, I think. But there again, I think just coming back to the fact that how incredible to have had those relationships and friendships, and they're
Mm.
still with you. You can bring them to your heart at any time. And I do through my days, if I walk past the pictures on top of my chest of drawers, I see my husband and of course begin thinking about him, and other members of my family and my friends, different little things that they've given me through the years. If I'm using something, I will think, oh, so and so gave me this, and the memories will start. But it's bittersweet because they are not here with you in the way that was so wonderful for all the time that they were.
And then honoring their legacy. How do you continue honoring the legacies of the people that had such a great impact in your life? And whilst I know your grandfather was instrumental on being part of why you have ventured into the vocation that you're doing today, who else have inspired and left a monumental legacy behind and that has inspired you? Would you like to share some of that with us?
Well, as I said, the three women that I mentioned when I
Yes.
became very serious about my work had left an incredible legacy from their lives. Josephine Jacobson's poetry is beautiful and astonishing, and she was. Um, I'm not sure if she was the first poet laureate of the United States. It was, but she was before I knew her, and I did
Mhm.
not know her until she was in her 80s. And so she was just a tremendous influence in my life and a great loss. It was a great loss to lose her, as it was to lose my wonderful mother of the heart in Italy, Regina Soria.
Mm.
She died in 2008 in her 90s, leaving an incredible legacy of um, the history that she discovered in art, and wrote about in the arts, and just a legacy of international friendship. She always was extremely determined to keep the connections between Italy and America very strong. In fact, she was knighted by the Italian government before she died for the work that she had done. And
Wow,
so they were
that's
amazing.
incredible.
And then Sister Maura Eichner was just the most beautiful spiritual leader, as well as which made her such a beautiful poet and is still remembered by everyone who knew her. So these were also great, great legacies that these people left me. And I'm so grateful for them.
And we get the gift of what they've imparted on your life. So before we end our segment, I now want to ask you, who is in the present moment a big influence in your life?
A big
Because
in-
everyone you've spoken about have since departed from our world.
I
And so
think
currently, who's leaving this imprint in your heart?
I think my granddaughters are just
Mm.
tremendously important in my life. I love vicariously living their lives. They're so good about keeping in touch and telling me about their adventures. My older granddaughter works in production in film. She took her just took her master's at in the New York university system in media writing, and finds herself working on film productions. And she always has such fun stories to tell me about the people that she meets, some of them well-known actors in her life. And I'm always fascinated with my younger granddaughters, the research that she's doing and working toward her master in earth sciences. And they are a tremendous influence in my life, and they are the future. And I'm very, very excited about it.
Oh, Marta, and I think it's reciprocal for them because in this day and age, for kids their age, well, young adults their age, to stay in contact with their grandmother
It's
speaks
wonderful.
volumes,
It's just
right?
I'm so amazed and thrilled that they do.
It's just lovely. So, in this last closure of our conversation, this delightful, very inspiring conversation that we've had,
For me also.
what would be, some golden nuggets you would love to leave our audience with that you believe is necessary for everyone, no matter where we are in the world, because we are still one human race? What would be
We,
those golden nuggets you'd like to give us all?
it isn't my golden nugget, but I believe with all my heart that we are all one. And we are all one in spirit. And this wonderful spirituality that is within us and surrounds us, it makes us one. And so, how could we ever have an enemy? Because then we'd be making ourselves an enemy.
I couldn't have said it better. I think what's his name? He's a scientist, Greg Braden. I don't know if you know his work.
Work. And he lives in New Mexico, not far from me.
I know he does. So hence I mention it. He speaks about the mirror of relationships.
Yes,
And he says, what you see in me, I see in you. So what you judge in me, you're judging in yourself.
exactly.
So there's a lot more depth to it. So for those that don't know Greg Braden and Ram Dass, and
Wonderful.
anyone else, Marta, that you may want to introduce us to, whose
I
work is profound.
You will laugh at me. We have something called YouTube, which has many documentaries on television. I don't know. Do you have it in South Africa too?
Yes, we do. Yes,
Watch Greg Braden's lectures
yes.
that are so good, and I agree with so much that he says. And
Mm.
Ram Dass, I have read, of course, and actually, I just watched a very fascinating program about Hermann Hesse, who wrote Siddhartha. And I haven't read it for years, but I'm going to go back and read it again
Yeah.
about the. And he eventually was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for the way that he
Mm.
changed his society through his books. And so I feel that I haven't given him the enthusiasm and interest that I should have. So I will be reading him next.
Well, thank you for that nugget there. Have you heard of Michael Singer, which speaks about the untethered soul?
No, tell me. I'm
Oh
going to write
my
that
gosh.
down.
No, I think you need to go and find him on the big black box of YouTube or
I,
red box. Michael Singer.
I will write
And
that down.
and he there's an audiobook out about the untethered soul. And it does just encapsulate everything this conversation was about, is to live in this moment now and to not live from a place of projection and perception, but to come from a place of non-attachment and to
Yes.
not be attached to the outcome or the future or to
Oh,
live in the past. So
yeah.
there's some sage wisdom in his teachings. And
Michael
it
said
just reminds me that when we are untethered in our soul, in our heart space, in our spirit,
yes.
nothing will make us live in suffering, in
I,
grief.
I agree.
So, on that note, I want to give you the last word before we say goodbye. Thank you for those that have been here on Instagram as well as on YouTube. And for those watching the replay, please do go and find Marta's poems. On that note, Marta, please tell our audience where we can find you, if you have a website or
I
any
do
social media pages.
transition at the moment, but I do have a website, or you could just go on Google and put Marta Knobloch, and I will appear. And also, I have a new
Doing
book
that.
coming out of haiku that is called "Absorb This Silence." That is actually out in paperback and on Kindle. Not out yet in hardback, but is coming out in hardback.
You come out at the top when I search on Google. So some really excellent SEO. And again, testament to the legacy that you've cultivated because you're sitting at the top.
But I would like my last word today to be thank you for teaching me today. It's been such an enormous pleasure to be with you.
Oh, It's an honor and privilege to host you. And I certainly feel like I want to go and learn more about your life story. And I'm on your website at the moment. So as we say goodbye, I want you to stay on the live. We will end the live, but I normally do a quick debrief at the end with my guest. And I encourage, I don't know if you are on LinkedIn as a platform.
I am on LinkedIn. I've been inactive, but I probably will be active again.
So what I'll do is I'll also send you a connection request there. And then
Thank
what I will do is tag all your information there. And if anybody does want to pass a comment or ask a question, they can then directly engage. But we will then put on all your um, web and other social media handles there. So
thank you
on
so
that note, thank you so much, Marta.
much.
Stay with me. I'm going to end the live on StreamYard, and then it will automatically end across all platforms. Until next week, we'll see you again, same time, same place, where we're going to be shifting from grudge to grit, grace, and gratitude. Thank you for being here and supporting us. And again, even if we just touch one person with Marta's wisdom that she shared here today, it means we're changing a home and potentially also a generation. So thank you again. Until next week.